Well, welcome back to Hillbilly Modeling. Now, we've been working on our M110 self-propelled howitzer by ITALERI here in 1/35th scale. And in the last video, we did some painting, got some of that taken care of, and we even did some wood graining and stuff on our tools. But now it's time to do some paint chipping and start to bring this model to life a little bit. But before we do that, there's something that we need to do to our road wheels. So let's jump down to the bench and get that taken care of. I didn't push record. So I'll just show you what I did. Back in step one, when we assembled our road wheels, as you can see here, there's that little cap that actually goes on the end of the spindle there on the road wheel arm. And that is to retain the road wheel so that they can actually. However, if we assemble the vehicle that way, it's going to leave a gap between the cap and the road wheels. And we don't want that gap there. So, yeah, what I did was I went ahead and glued the caps on. And the way I did it, I slid the road wheels over top of the axle and then put the cap on, flowed just a little bit of Tamiya extra thin underneath the cap, and then pulled the road wheel and the cap off as an assembly. We didn't want to actually cement these into place yet. Now, even though we are putting workable tracks on, we don't really care that these road wheels actually rotate. There is, no poly caps or anything like that in this kit. So that was ITALERI's solution there to keep them on and to allow them to rotate. So yeah, I think it's going to be better though if we just have those caps on. Now we may have to trim those little pins off the end of our road wheel arms to make sure that everything lines up. So now it's time for some chipping, and we're going to need a chipping color to do that. So this is the color that we had, the Vallejo Olive Drab, and then we're going to put in just a little bit of white. It doesn't matter if it's glossy or not, just as long as it's acrylic. These are both acrylic paints, one from Vallejo, the other one is a craft paint. and I don't have any issues actually mixing these colors together. Even though they are different brands and everything, it all seems to work out quite well. So we're going to go ahead and put a little bit of this white in here. And we're going to need to mix this. And to do that, we're going to use the handle of the a little paint mixing spoon. I could use a spoon end, I guess. I'm just doing things backwards. Anyway, we are going to mix this up really well. And you do need something kind of wide in order to actually kind of blend and smash that thicker paint into the olive drab there so that it'll mix well. Now, as you can see, it is considerably lighter than the base coat of the olive drab that we have on the vehicle. And it's kind of a sick looking color, but it's actually what we need. A very distinguishable lighter color. And this is going with the concept that once paint gets scratched, it tends to be lighter underneath than the darker exterior surface of the paint. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use this to indicate those wear and scratches and what have you on the actual vehicle. Now, to apply this, we're going to be using some synthetic sponge here. This is just packing material from like electronics or something like that. Just anything you can kind of scavenge that from. Works really good, especially with acrylics. The other thing is that if you are going to use enamels, then you need to test your synthetic sponge and make sure that it can withstand solvents because some synthetic materials will dissolve, and then you'll leave little tidbits of your sponge in your paint job. So just beware that if you are not using a water-based paint like we are here, that you need to test it, especially if it is solvent-based. So anyway, the concept here is to just put little small chips And we're just going to start at the front of the vehicle here, right on that lower curved surface there. As you can imagine, you know, you'd be driving over rough terrain, and you've got rocks and bushes and all kinds of stuff that you're running over. And this is one of those areas that you do expect to see some paint damage. Now, when it comes to trying out your color for your chipping, always the bottom of the vehicle is a good place to start. That way, if you don't like it, you can mix yourself a new chipping color and no harm done. You don't want to start in an area that's going to be seen. So use the bottom of the vehicle kind of as a test bed to make sure that that color looks good. And as you can see here, we kind of got that chalky look going on with our chips, and that's exactly what we want to have. So that's going to look nice. Now, the look that I'm going for on this vehicle is, you know, slightly used and but not abused kind of look. So there are areas where you do expect to see some chips and some wear. Here on the drive sprockets, on the teeth, of course there's going to be wear there. Now we're going to come back later and use some polished metal effects to kind of shine up those sprocket teeth there where they make contact with the tracks. But this is kind of just the first layer of our weathering process, or, well, you know, chipping process. So we'll do those, both the sprockets on the left and right. And of course you're going to expect some little dents and dings, you know, along the edges. So anywhere there's a sharp edge, it's always a good candidate to have a chip. So we're going to keep in that framework there to put most of our chips down. And the engine and transmission cover on the vehicle get removed quite a bit for engine maintenance and repair. So you're going to expect these to be a little dinged up from the mechanics, you know, removing the transmission cover that we're doing here. That's the big flat one there. And they will lay that down on the ground and then reinstall it after they're done. Same thing with the engine cover, and then we're also going to grab just those edges over top of the driver's periscopes. You can probably think that driving through brush and the driver climbing in and out, so we're going to give that a little bit of wear there. Now, the driver enters the vehicle from the front. That's what that little step in the very front of the vehicle is for. So you can expect that there would be some chips and worn paint right on the slope in front of the driver's hatch. So we'll go ahead and put a few chips there. Also, it's a good idea, any big flat surface that you have, just throwing in a few chips here and there kind of breaks up that solid green surface that we have going on there. Now, as we continue to think about the high traffic areas and places where there's going to be chips and scratches, one of the places, of course, is going to be the breech of our main gun. As you can imagine, shells and cleaning equipment and all that stuff going on there. So we would expect to see a little bit of chipping there, especially where they start to feed the rounds into the breech. So we'll put some chipping there. Now I'm just going to put a few chips along the actual gun tube itself. Not a lot, because there's very little contact that the crew and other things would need to come in contact with the gun tube. Since it is the primary weapon, you're going to do everything you can to kind of protect that as much as possible. Now, one of the major things that is used a lot with field artillery is camouflage netting. So you would see a little bit of chipping and wear, maybe right on the kind of the edge or the the muzzle of the gun tube, where the camouflage netting is being pulled across. Little things like that, but as far as large damage areas, probably not. Another area where there's going to be some chipping is going to be on the road wheels themselves. So we are going to put some chips there. I'm not going to go crazy with it. I know it looks like I'm going crazy with it, but we're actually not putting that many chips on there. And it always seems that I get the best chipping when I really got to work at it, to kind of work the paint out of the little bitty piece of sponge there. If you've got too much paint in that sponge, then you're going to end up with blobs instead of little chips. And remember, you got to stay in scale with your chips. Great big blobs of paint is way out of scale, and it kind of looks funny. So the smallest chip is always the best chip. So that is what we're looking to do. Yeah, that looks good. Not bad. So we only have, 9 more to do. So we've put in some chips. Now it's time for some scratches. So I'm just using a real small pointy brush here to accomplish that. You don't really want a big wide scratch, I don't think. We're going to stay small, and of course, it's not going to be scratched all over. So just kind of in key areas, high traffic areas, or anywhere where equipment's being pushed across the top of the vehicle, or the crew's climbing in and out with equipment. That's where you expect to see scratches. So that's where we will put ours, and just kind of spread them out along the vehicle. And you can have them kind of random too. Just you want to make sure that everything kind of makes sense. Now, as you can see here, I'm kind of using the ... method of doing a scratch. And if you've ever slid something heavy across another surface, you know that it kind of scrapes. It's not a smooth slide most of the time, and that's kind of what you would expect across the paint of the vehicle. And it kind of leaves a little Morse code kind of line there. So we're going to simulate that by doing the ... thing with the brush. And also the brush allows us to get in tight in certain areas, like around the driver's hatch. You would expect the edges of that to be chipped. So since the vehicle's already assembled and everything, we're going to use the brush to put those wire points in there. Now, I don't intend to do a whole lot of chipping and everything on the bottom of the vehicle, although of course it would have quite a bit. However, you're not going to see it unless you actually pick the vehicle up and look at the bottom of it. However, I just want to show how you can kind of a lot of times your brush is just too wide to actually make a good trailing thin line. Here I'm kind of demonstrating a pull and push method for making those scratches. So by putting the paint on at the start point, and then you can kind of push forward. In this case, we're traveling back towards the rear of the vehicle. You can kind of get a much better scratch, one that kind of indicates that it's trailing off. So give that a try if you haven't tried it before, and maybe it'll work for you. It works well for me. Now, I decided to go a little crazy here with the chipping on the fighting platform here on the back of the vehicle. As you can imagine, the crew's going to be doing a lot of walking back and forth, handling rounds and all that. So I just kind of sponged in quite a bit of wire there, and also got it on the turntable. It helps to actually install the gun so that you can kind of get a feel for where those heavy areas are going to be. And of course, we did the bottom of the vehicle too. Now we're going to do some extensive chipping to actually show bare metal. So this is just the first step in getting that process done. And as you can see here, we've got our heavy chipping there, right on the breech of the gun. And those are the areas that are going to see, you know, the most use. And just a little bit of chipping there on the muzzle. Next up, we're going to go back to our German Panzer Gray here, this real dark gray. We're going to use that as our second chipping color. We're going to start off with those heavy traffic areas on the rear of the vehicle. And we're just using our chipping sponge to do this. I don't want any brush marks. I just want to kind of lay in a heavier traffic area there. So we're going to kind of stay inside of our previous chipping there. I'm going to start off right in the middle and just lay this color down. And we're just going to gradually widen it out towards the edges of the lighter chipping color there. So this kind of gives us the impression of a oxidation and what have you on the metal, along with maybe a primer coat underneath or something like that. And we're just going to work it out towards the edges of the lighter chipping color there. Yeah, sorry, my hand's in the way. So there, you can see better what I'm doing here. Just going to keep spreading this out towards the edges. And it helps by putting the gun into place so that you know where the gunner is going to be climbing onto the rig and back out of their seats, the gunner and the assistant gunner, and what that path actually looks like. So by putting, and then of course removing the gun cradle and the turntable and everything so that it's not in your way, you can figure out where these wear patterns are really where they should be located. And we don't want to forget about our turntable either. Those little flat areas on either side of the gun. We'll take care of that as well. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of frame there, but you kind of get the idea of what I'm doing. Sorry about that. I just got too involved in my sponging. Now we're also going to use this color to come in and kind of put little dark spots in the largest of our chips around the vehicle. Now what this does is give us the effect of much deeper chips there. Now we don't want to do this with every single chip that we've put in the lighter color, just on the biggest ones, and then on the areas and corners where the most wear is going to take place on the vehicle. And one of those places is going to be where the travel lock sits right on top of the hull there. So we're going to come in and darken those areas in too. And then for the access panel here right behind the driver where maintenance has been performed on the vehicle, we'll just kind of color in a couple of those. And then of course you can expect some really deep areas through the paint on the very front of the vehicle. So we don't want to miss that opportunity to kind of enhance these a little bit. And of course, you know, don't forget about your road wheels. Oftentimes I do, and I always got to come back and do them. But yeah, we want to continue on with that same theme. Just don't overdo it. We don't want our vehicle coming out looking like a spotted leopard or something like that. So now for the magic, and that is our enamel flat steel. This is a Tester's enamel paint. It is, of course, solvent-based. And I do like using this because it blends and spreads very well. And you can dry brush it. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're going to put the paint on the brush and unload most of it. And then we're going to come back in the center of all of these dark patches that we have sponged in. And we're just going to kind of start spreading this around. Now we don't want to use a whole lot of paint. We want the effect of the exterior finish being worn down to the metal. And just by using just very little paint, we can kind of blend and spread it out towards the edges of the black there. Now, you don't want to take it all the way to the edge, but get it as close as you can. That kind of enhances the effect there. And as you can see, we're starting to get that look like the paint's been worn down right to the metal. Now, a lot of modelers nowadays tend to kind of lean towards hairspray chipping for this kind of effect, but that involves actually painting the vehicle in the silver and then laying down your hairspray or your chipping fluid, painting a second color over top of it, chipping it, and then kind of sealing that, and then they lay down the chipping fluid again, and then paint their top color on, you know, and layering all those colors and all of that is just, it's really time consuming. And the problem that I have with the hairspray or chipping fluid type chipping is I don't really have control over that. I just find it easier to do it this way, and that way I'm in control of where these wear patterns are on the actual vehicle. Now, you can it's debatable whether or not they're realistic, but at least I do have control over it. And if you don't like it, you can always take it off or paint over it. So no harm done there. Now, as you can see, we're kind of concentrating on the areas where the field artillery guys are standing or moving around on the vehicle, to include where the gunner and assistant gunner are going to have their feet placed on the side of the turntable. So we're just going to pay special attention to those areas there for all of our excessive wear. So there we go. That's kind of a nice look. Yeah, I think we're getting there. So let's not forget about the bottom of the vehicle. We're using the same method on the very bottom as we did in the fighting positions. So you kind of have to pay attention to which direction the vehicle normally runs so that you can kind of get this right. And that is the shinier spots. Here, I'm kind of doing it right aft of that plate that actually sticks down on the bottom of the vehicle. And you can imagine you probably high center a few things. And yeah, it's going to be worn through aft of the plate, but not right up against the plate, because the plate kind of protects the hull there in that area. So the paint's not going to be damaged right up next to the plate. And then, of course, the same thing with the actual plate. The leading edge is going to scrape and hit and drag on things more so than the center of the plate. So we're just kind of treating that leading edge with that same effect there. Do, however, pay attention to the fact that the center of the hull is going to drag more than off towards the tracks, because the tracks kind of protect that a little bit. So most of your wear is going to be down the middle of the vehicle. What I'm going to do now is use this Vallejo gloss acrylic varnish, and we're going to seal in everything and help prepare the surface for the next couple of steps. One of them being the decals, which we're going to do immediately after we get this done. But we do need to make sure that this gloss finish has dried completely. We don't want any little mess ups there. So the decals that I've chosen to do, we're going to be doing A here, version A. That's the Dirty Dozen, U.S. Army 13th Field Artillery Regiment, 3rd Battalion, D Company, South Vietnam. And that's 1968. And as you can see, we got the Dirty Dozen, the skull and crossbones, and the little griffin or whatever it is that goes on that white field on the barrel. And then on the front it says the Klan. And yeah, so those are the decals that we're going to be doing. Now when it comes to our decals, you can see that we have the one for all the versions, and then we have sections here that's already they've got a little dotted line there that separates the decals for each one of the versions. And since we're going to do version A, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out the version A, and then we can just set the other versions aside. It's always good to keep those decals around just in case you need something on another build. You can have something to take care of those spaces. Now, as you can see here, they've got for B, C, and D version there. Very nice. So yeah, we're going to set those aside, and we're going to work with the regular decals that work for our version. Now, since that is a dotted line there that is on the printed decals there, one thing that you need to take into account is that that will come loose when we soak these decals into water. And we don't want those stuck up underneath our decals or getting on top of our decals as we're trying to apply those to the vehicle. So you do need to separate those along with the little numbers that are identifying which ones are the right decal for each location. And since these are water slide, we need some warm tap water. I got some Q-tips or cotton buds, some tweezers, and we're also going to be using some micro set and micro saw. And micro set is going to help the adhesion of the decal to the actual model, and then micro saw, we're going to be using that if we need to really soften a decal quite a bit to get it to lay down. And then of course a little toothpick is always nice to have. And as I showed you, I do use two different brushes for the micro set and micro saw so that we're not cross-contaminating those two fluids. So as I'm about to begin, I've already spotted a problem. So this little placard here, right on the very rear corner, on the side of the vehicle, the call out is a number 7. And then it also calls out a number 7 for the back of the vehicle. And those are two totally different decals or decals. So you need to really pay attention to that, because the large one here on the side is actually number 5. And you can tell once you separate everything from the sheets, it becomes obvious that those decals are nowhere near the same. So what we need to do is go ahead and size them up, make sure that we got the right ones for the right section of the vehicle. And like I say, this is the very first decal that I picked up that I was going to install. And yes, the number 5 is actually the one that goes on the side of the vehicle there. And then, of course, the number 7, way too small. If you look at the diagram also for our decal location, you'll see that that's the one that actually goes on the back of the vehicle. So, with that already straightened out, we need to make sure that we pay attention to all of our other decal markings there. Now, for the benefit of you guys that may be just getting back into modeling after not having modeled for a while, or maybe it's just a new hobby for you, I am using warm water here to loosen the decal from the backing board that it's on, the little cardboard piece, the paper. And we'll be using the micro set to help adhesion. So I just dipped it into the water there, give it, 10 to 20 seconds, pull it out, and let it continue to loosen up so that it'll come off of that piece of backing paper there. And what we're doing is we're actually activating the glue that's on there, and we're just checking to see if it's ready to move. And once we're satisfied that that decal is ready to slide off of there, we'll go ahead and prepare the surface on the actual model by using the micro set. And we're just going to put a little bit of that right where the decal is going to go. And then hopefully, well, I'm going to move my micro set out of the way so I don't knock it over. Yeah, and hopefully this will just slide right off. And I am just using the wooden toothpick to do this because I don't want to damage the decal, and we just slide it off into place. Now we do have a little bit of time to kind of move it around and get it lined up. Now, one of my trademarks is that I always have a crooked decal. Okay, so I claim that as a trademark, but it's just what tends to happen with me. But we do want to avoid that as much as possible. So I'm being very careful to make sure that I can get that decal located exactly where it needs to go. Now, once it is located, we're just going to give it a few minutes to actually start to dry. Now, if you have excessive fluid there, you can kind of soak it away at one of the corners, but don't try to rub on it or remove it. You need to actually let that decal set for a little bit and let it settle in so that it's not sliding around on you. Then I come in and just get rid of the excess there. And I'm just going to let it set and settle down. And we'll come back later and kind of roll over top of it to squeeze any air or any extra fluid out from underneath it. So that's given me plenty of time to put another decal on. And then I'm going to come back and just make sure that there's no fluid trapped up underneath it there. Just like so. By letting that set for a while, I don't have to worry too much about the decal slipping and sliding around. Now remember, now we put a clear gloss coat over top of that flat green paint to help with the adherence here of our decals, and hopefully that will eliminate or at least reduce the possibility of decal silvering. And that's what happens when there is air or a void between the decal and the actual paint on the vehicle. So I don't think we're going to have that problem. Or at least I hope we don't. So the next challenging decal we have is going to be this star that goes on the transmission cover. And if you look carefully at the instructions, the star looks like it's upside down, but it's not. It's pointing in the correct position. So that it is visible from the air. However, this decal has to lay down over top of all these little rivets that's on this transmission cover. So just like before, we're just going to slide this off into place. And it kind of stuck to the surface a little quick. So I'm going to use a little bit more micro set and kind of wet up around the edges of it there. This is called refloating. And we should be able to get it to slide, and so that we can adjust its position. And so I need to move it over exactly where I want it. One of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to have too many of these little rivets to settle this decal down over top of. So the upper edges of the star, which is right where my toothpick is right now, I'm going to move that up so that it's not setting right over top of that row of rivets. And that may not be exactly what it shows on the diagram, but that's what I'm going to do. That way I don't have to worry about too many of these little rivets to settle this decal down on. So the next thing to do is to get rid of as much of that excess fluid there, the combination of the water and the micro set, so that the decal will actually start to stick to the model. And I just want the lower edge of this decal to actually stick, because we're going to kind of roll it out and get rid of some of the air. But before I do that, I'm going to lay in a little bit of this micro sol right on top of the decal. Now, micro sol is very similar to micro set, except that it's a little bit more aggressive. And what it will do is really start to soften that decal up. Now, depending upon the manufacturer of the decal and various other things, you have to be very careful here, because you can soften that decal to the point to where it will tear, and we don't want it to tear. We just need it to stretch a little bit for us. Now, after giving our micro sol a little bit of time to actually work, we can start working the decal. And I want to make sure that that lower edge is secure to the vehicle, because I don't need everything sliding around. And now we're just going to gently roll our cotton bud or Q-tip right across the decal, and we're squeezing out any air and any bubbles that's underneath it there. And we need to make sure that we are rolling it so that we're not going to tear our decal, because these decals are a little bit thinner than, say, the Tamiya ones, which I usually am stuck with trying to get to settle in. So they're going to settle a lot quicker, and we don't want to damage them. Now, it's not unusual to have a little bit of problem getting it to actually settle down around, especially these little rivets that are here on this cover. So I'm just putting a little bit more micro sol on it to soften it up. We'll give it a minute or two to soften up the decal some more. And then I'm going to use a wet Q-tip. And the reason why I want it wet and not dry is because the micro sol will make that decal kind of tacky. And we don't want the decal to stick to our cotton bud here, or our Q-tip, because we may pull off pieces of it. So make sure that you wet that decal, or not the decal, but the cotton bud, so that the decal doesn't stick to your Q-tip. And then some gentle pressure there, and we're just pushing that decal down around those rivets there. Now, you may have to do this more than once, and maybe more than twice, to actually get it to lay down. But be careful and be gentle with it, and take your time, and then these decals will come out looking like they were painted on. So the next decal we're going to look at is going to be the one for the gun tube, and that is this dragon or griffin. I think it's probably a dragon. I have trimmed the paper down really close, and if I put the top of the decal center of the gun tube, you kind of see how far down the red figure there goes, and that's a bit too far. So what I've decided to do, and I kind of thought that this was going to be the case, I'm just going to trim really close to the red figure here. Kind of make a nice rectangle square, kind of, well, it's more of a rectangle, patch to go on over top of the white that we had painted onto the gun tube. And I think that's going to make it much easier to actually apply this decal. So, same process, and we'll get all the decals on. So, okay, I got all the decals onto our gun tube. Now, one thing that I will say, now our dragons don't look too bad. At least I think they're dragons. Yes. Now, when it comes to the skull and crossbones here, mine's a little bit further back from the muzzle than what they show us right there in the on the schematic. But that's because in order to get the edges of it actually vertical, you know, all the way around the gun tube, I had to keep moving it back and forth so that it would mate up correctly. Now, there is a little bit of overlap, and that's okay. And it come out pretty good. I'm actually pleased with how it come out, but you got to remember, we have two different angles here. We've got the barrel tapering down and then the muzzle flaring out. So you actually got to find that sweet spot with your decal in order to get it to sit evenly all the way around. Now, I didn't have to use any micro sol or anything like that on it. Just the micro set was more than enough, and that decal settled down nicely. So that's good. Also, we got all the other decals on. We got the ones on the back, and of course, you know, you've seen all the side and then everything on the front. And we got our star here on our transmission cover to actually settle down around those rivet and bolt details there. So we're in really good shape. Now, there is one decal, which I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a little black decal right there. That one is not in the schematic here. You have to actually go back in your instructions. And I went back through the instructions to make sure that I didn't miss any decals. And the only other decal that it talked about, yeah, is in step 8, right there, showing the, and it actually says decal right there. Now we do have some other decals that are included, and this is the 25 3F13, which is the same as here, and then our Delta 14, which is right there. Those are normally the decals that would go on the back of the vehicle. However, there's nowhere on the back of the vehicle for it to go. So yeah, I'm kind of deciding right now if I should. I know when I was in the engineers, combat engineers, we would have put them on the spade, right there and right there. However, our schematic here for our decals doesn't show that. So I'm kind of halfway in between whether I should do that or not. I think I'm just going to leave them off. And that might be the right call, and it might be wrong. I don't know. So, but the other thing that I am going to do, I'm going to allow all these decals to dry for 24 hours before I come back in and put that gloss clear coat over top of them to seal them in, because I really want to make sure that we're not going to have any silvering, you know, and any little pockets underneath the decals, because if we do, we got to take care of that before we apply paint over top of it. So I'm going to allow this to sit overnight, and then I'll come back in and clear coat that one more time just for the decals, so that the next process, which is going to be the panel liner and stuff, which will be in the next video, so that's not going to affect our decals. We don't want any panel liner or enamel products to seep up underneath those. So we need to seal those in just to be on the safe side. And I know some people are going to say, well, you don't need to do that, but I feel safer if I do. But I do need to make sure that we're not going to have any silvering. So we're going to let that dry for a day. So that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Special thanks to all of my subscribers. Because of you guys, I keep making these videos, and I hope that you enjoyed this one. And if you're new to the channel, I hope that I earned your subscription. And don't forget to leave me a comment. I love hearing from you guys. So yeah, until I see you again next Friday, you guys stay safe.